Welcome back to Askewed Reviews. And this whole week I'm going through the entire Tremors film series. And today I'm doing the 2004 film Tremors 4: The Legend Begins. Here is your trivia question for today. What are graboids called in this film? The answer will be at the end of this episode. So this is a prequel in the series as we head back to 1889, and the town is not yet called Perfection, but is instead called Rejection. There's a local silver mine near the town of Rejection that's giving it its current prosperity. Now, unfortunately, something begins attacking and unaliving all of the miners. So since this then causes the mine to have to shut down, the people of Rejection begin to leave. So as for the citizens that remain in Rejection, they decide to reach out to the man who owns the mine to see if there's anything that he can do about it. So not too long afterwards, the man who owns the mine does in fact show up. So that man just so happens to be Hiram Gummer, the great-grandfather of Bert Gummer, who has been one of the integral parts of the Tremors series so far. So one of the remaining miners and a citizen of Rejection, Juan takes Mr. Gummer to meet the rest of the remaining miners, and they all head off towards the mine. Now that night while they set up camp, these small creatures begin showing up that are in the earth and start attacking all of them. Hiram and Juan end up being the only two survivors, and they manage to make their way back to Rejection. Hiram then wires out to see if he can get any local gunfighters to come out and take care of this problem for them. After about 1 month, he does in fact show up. It's a renowned gunfighter known as Black Hand Kelly, and he offers to help them take care of their issue. But unfortunately, after that 1 month period, Black Hand Kelly finds out that these have gotten much, much larger, and they quickly dispatch of the town's gunfighter. So, will the remaining citizens of Rejection be able to pull together, use some interesting weaponry, and take out these massive creatures? This movie was directed by S.S. Wilson, who also directed the second Tremors movie, and since the very first Tremors film, he and Brent Maddock have been writing every script. So for the first and only time in the Tremors series, Michael Gross is not playing Bert Gummer, but in fact Bert's great-grandfather, Hiram Gummer. In the film, though, we do find out where the Gummers started to get their interest in guns and their proclivity for redheads. One of the other actors you might recognize is Billy Drago, who plays the character of Black Hand Kelly, but also became very well known for playing villains in films. The role of Old Fred was played by J.E. Freeman, and unfortunately this was his final film. Also, the character of Old Fred is supposed to be a nod to the character of the same name from the first Tremors film. Matthew Seth Wilson plays the character of Brick Walters in this film, but he was also in the third film as a tourist. The 2-inch bore punt shotgun that Hiram uses in the film was in actuality a real weapon. It was used to shoot entire flocks of ducks at one time. This movie is the first one to introduce baby graboids. They don't have a technical name just because they're just baby versions of them, but the unofficial names are either shooters or grablites. This is also the first film where graboids can apparently leap out of the earth and attack. Tremors 4 is also the first movie to where on the poster you see an actual graboid. The first 3 films, you only see variations of the tongues of the graboid, although with the second movie I'm not really sure what's going on here, because this looks nothing like any of the creatures, but instead looks like the graboids have decided to become a trio of singers. So the film takes place in 1889. This was chosen as it was 100 years before the first film, as even though that one came out in 1990, it was planned to be released in 1989, and that was supposed to be the year that it takes place in. Now, by them choosing the year 1889, this does cause a continuity issue, as by the end of this film, they are changing the town from Rejection into Perfection. And in the previous films, in the future of Perfection, on the sign it says that it was established in 1902. So more than likely this means one of two things. Either 1, this is a big continuity issue, or 2, there is the possibility that even though they call it Perfection, it wasn't officially established until 1902. Now, Hiram staying in Perfection is another continuity issue, due to the fact that supposedly he has now moved there by the end of the film. But we know that Bert and Heather say that they decided to move to Perfection because of how remote it is. You may have never noticed this, but Christine's hotel is actually located where Nancy and Mindy's house eventually would go up in the first film. Chang's market, on the other hand, looks like it has been around since 1889 and has just been passed down from one relative to the next. This movie takes place in Nevada in the Old West, but it was entirely filmed in California. In this movie, they mention that Carson City is the nearest town to perfection. That is actually a real town. Now, in the first film, Bixby is being told as the closest town, so assumedly, perfection was established before Bixby. Also, in real life, Bixby is a fictional town that is supposedly 30 miles from perfection. The only time in anything related to Tremors that you actually get to see Bixby is in the television series. So when it comes to the film Tremors 4: The Legend Begins, this one is unfortunately my least favorite in the series, just because I felt that none of it really added to the story at all. It was just kind of a fun little, almost spin-off story. So I'm sure it was fun for the cast, but in general, I didn't feel that it was a great movie. Not that the story was bad, that was actually kind of okay. But I'm going to give this one a 2 out of 5. Now, if you like this film, other movies I recommend checking out are The Burrowers, Oblivion, From Dusk Till Dawn 3, The Hangman's Daughter, and Back to the Future Part 3. Now it's time for the trivia question from the beginning of this episode. What are graboids called in this film? So just like in the first and third films, it is a member of the Chang family that names the creatures this time around. Pyong Chang uses the word Dilong to describe the actual creatures. Now, roughly translated from Chinese, that essentially means dirt dragons, and that's what they end up calling the creatures, as graboids would not be used until years later. Also, with this movie's release, there was actually a browser video game tie-in called Dirt Dragons. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Askewed Reviews, and if there's a movie you'd like to see get a review, just mention it in the comments.